Good morning. Namaskar. My name is Bhuvan. This is the Indian Express Explained, where we discuss the most important news from the Indian Express and say other news of relevance for a civil service aspirant. Okay. Bulbul, Manju, just a minute. Coda, good morning, guys. Thanks for joining. Let's get started. I have three news as I told you. Number one is to do with IUCN Red List. Now, all of you must be abundantly aware of, say, what the IUCN Red List is. But today we'll go and understand what the criticism about the IUCN Red List is. Okay. And because you have a criticism, you also have a challenger. And the challenger is IPBES. So we'll seek to understand the difference of approach that IUCN takes and what IPBES does and whether IUCN is now becoming outdated. Okay. The red list is becoming outdated. Then after that, number two, we will look at a very important news from the Indian Express, where it has been confirmed that an ISRO astronaut is now going to be heading to the International Space Station. Okay, so convergence of two important topics for us. First, number one is, say, ISRO's planned missions in the near future until at least, say, 2040. So we seek to know at least the chronological order of them. And then we need to understand, say, the relevance of ISS. Yes, where is India figuring in this puzzle, which will happen post the Russian pullout from the International Space Station? We have had the Artemis Accords recently. Okay, so where does India fit in, and what does this mean for India's position insofar as, say, the space race is concerned? Okay, and then number three, we'll take a look at lightning over Gujarat that has been reported in the news extensively. Okay, and we'll go ahead and break it down, not just to say what happened, but also say what lightning is and why is it that it is not classified as a disaster in India. Okay, so that's what we'll seek to understand. Let's get started. You will get the entire PDF of this lecture uploaded on my Telegram channel, where I share the important resources for you. We look at questions. Okay, it's the one-stop destination that you need. Plus, obviously, the first information about all the forthcoming sessions, including the Aranya series, will be uploaded here. Right. So let's look at the heading here, guys. Time for version 2.0. IUCN Red List outdated and unreliable. Right. So why is it being considered unreliable? What is the red list? What is the significance? All of that is going to be the scope of this very short discussion, but it will be a concise discussion that will cover all the angles for you. Okay, let's go ahead and understand them now one by one. So what exactly is the IUCN Red List? Firstly, it is an extinction risk assessment tool, right? Which means what? You are going to figure out on a scale as to say how likely a species is to go extinct. Right? And it has three kind of data sets if you look at. So one is to do with threatened categories, right? Let's look at them one by one here, guys. One is the threatened categories where you have critically endangered, and vulnerable, depending on the level of threat the particular species is facing. Thereafter that, you have species that are covered under adequate data, right? Which means you have data about them, considerable data exists, which includes the near threatened, as well as the least concern, right? And then you have data deficient, which goes under just evaluated. So four different types of subsets that you are looking at. Okay. Now please understand this. Here you have data deficient or not evaluated. Now this is an important area of concern for us, which means that there exist certain species that have not been considered in this chart. Now, what is the number of that species is important for us. If that number is of huge, right? So, for example, out of the 100% of known species to mankind or humankind, if the red list just includes, say, 10 or 20%, then do you realize that this is not exactly the, say, one-stop destination or the complete tool that you require to know the extinction level of each and every species? Charu, good morning, welcome. Okay. So even then, you realize that considering that it is the world's most comprehensive information source on the extinction risk a particular species faces. So 9 categories like I told you. And what happens because of this then? So what happens if an animal is, say, near threatened, or what happens if an animal is vulnerable or critically endangered? You find this directly goes and correlates into public interest. And the more the public interest, the more the funding that follows. So do you realize, like George Orwell said, no? So all animals are equal, some animals are more equal than the others. Similarly, that's what you find here. That even though a particular species might be at considerable risk given the local factors, okay, just because say IUCN has categorized it as a say near threatened or a vulnerable only, not much money or finances will be allocated for its conservation. Whereas you will have obviously and rightly so, for those particular species that are in these two categories, a lot of money being allocated. Okay. So let's go ahead and understand the flaws of the IUCN Red List now. Number one, and so look at this, the global biodiversity estimates that we have tell us that our species exceed 50 million. Okay. But the IUCN just goes ahead and assesses 10% of all species, which means incomplete coverage is the first criticism of the IUCN Red List. Right? Let's look at this now. Red List has 42,100 species that are classified as threatened. Whereas a new body, and we'll seek to understand what is the IPBES. Essentially, it's an intergovernmental organization, right? And they went ahead, they also do assessments on say biodiversity and ecosystem services. And in the process of assessment, they have gone ahead and categorized that more than 1 million species are facing potential extinction threats. You realize? So the assessment being done by IUCN or the Red List, right, versus the assessment being done by the IPBES, right, you find that this one is a lot more complete, lot more holistic. And thus people are questioning, well, what is it exactly the most complete document of species extinction levels at all? Okay. Now, IUCN recommends that reassessments be carried out every 10 years, right? So it has various organizations that it collaborates with, say BirdLife International and other organizations that it collaborates with and goes about say assessing different categories of plants and animals, right? Different kinds of animals. And then what happens exactly after that? So this was supposed to happen every 10 years, but you find that, well, not everything is happening on a timely fashion. Plus, many scientists argue that 10 years is far too a long period to understand the threat level or the effect it has on a particular species, and that time lag of survey should be lesser. Okay. And then the last, but not the least, flaws of the IUCN Red List, that the categories and criteria are over 30 years old, right? Once again, the evolution of the assessment is also being questioned. Correct? People are asking for integration of more technology in assessment, right? That also has to be given precedence. That is not happening so far. A lot of the time it is to do with the interpretation or say those particular methods that would have made sense in say 1970s or 80s, but probably are not relevant to 2030 or 2025. Correct? So these are the primary flaws of the IUCN Red List. Now that I've told you about IPBES, let's go ahead and understand more about this now. What exactly does IPBES do? So Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. Here is the key term for you. Science Policy Platform. What does it understand? What does it mean? That you will have to frame policy based on evidence. And that evidence is coming from scientific assessment. Do you realize? They have tried to plug in those gaps that the Red List was facing. See, this is the important term that you need to understand. The term gives it away as to what the mandate of the organization is now. Okay. So it's an intergovernmental body, right? Established in Panama City, headquartered in Bonn, Germany. Now, it is not a United Nations body. Okay. They are just provided secretarial assistance by United Nations. And what you find is they go ahead and publish two important reports. Many other important reports are published by them. But these two important reports, one key concept that you need to understand now. Okay. So the IPBES goes and says, well, there are certain drivers of biodiversity change. Okay. What are drivers? Those factors that are changing my biodiversity. And then IPBES goes and classifies them into two parts. One is the direct driver of biodiversity change. And then the second is the indirect driver of biodiversity change. Now, what is a direct driver? Essentially, those factors that have a direct effect, an immediate effect on the biodiversity. So, you're looking at, say, climate change. You're looking at pollution. Okay, let's understand this. Your direct drivers. you are looking at climate change. Okay. Number 2, pollution. The more pollution you do, the more adversely and directly you affect your biodiversity. You're looking at land use and say water efficiency. Okay. Climate change, pollution, land use and water efficiency. And then the last one you're looking at is the exploitation of organisms. Okay. So these are the 4 direct ones that it identifies. Now what are the indirect ones? Straight away. Number 1, it identifies, say, the interest of the public in conservation. Okay. So the value that people are placing on conservation, which comes as a result of the interest of people. This is an indirect factor that goes and affects my biodiversity. And number 2, it goes ahead and identifies that the disconnect that people have with nature. Yes, that now people are a lot more, say, towards technology. They are facing a disconnect with nature. So people's disconnect with nature, right, is also another factor that goes and affects my biodiversity negatively. Okay. Very, very important, because this for the first time that you had an organization that included this concept. Okay. In earlier reports so far, nothing was attributed to, say, the interest of the people. It was understood that yes, people would be interested in, say, conserving nature and biodiversity. But then for the first time you had a body that come out and say, well, this also needs to be questioned. Okay. So what are the functions of IPBES? As I told you, number 1, it goes and assesses. Its assessment is much more complete than IUCN Red List. Okay. Then policy support tools. Based on these assessments, it will go ahead and make policy recommendations. It will help in capacity building, those services that affect your efficiency positively. Yes. Essentially all those things, finances, training, institutions, all of that is required for you to function in an efficient manner is a part of capacity building. And finally, knowledge generation, filling up that knowledge gap, because once again what you find is that the IUCN Red List is not the most complete document. Okay. Right. Let's go ahead and answer this for me very quickly, guys. It's a straightforward question. Which of the above may be considered to be a direct driver of biodiversity loss? Land and sea use change, exploitation of organisms, human indifference towards nature, climate change, pollution, and lack of value on importance of conservation. Okay. Let me know your answers in the chat box. Plus, please do try to include the concept of the direct and the indirect ones that we discussed. Right. Given that environment is a often asked question, not just in mains, but also very likely to be asked a large number of questions in the prelims, you ought to have a fair idea of what the direct and the indirect methods of biodiversity conservation and change are. Right. That was the first topic. If you understood the IUCN Red List's flaws, okay, because again, it's not just important for you to know about what the IUCN Red List is, but also have the analysis behind it. Critically analyzed questions are often asked, and this would be a direct answer to that question, right? So if you understood how we went ahead and discussed the particular topic, well, go ahead and leave me a like. I'd be most grateful to you. Okay. Before I go forward in 60 seconds or less, the SIP Plus 2024 Success in Prelims program, which is this prelims-oriented program that has been launched by StudyIQ. Yes, you are looking at intensive tests, a focus on concept building, right? You have doubt classes, resolutions, all that is required for you to go ahead and crack prelims. And please realize, cracking prelims is not just to do with studying, but it is also to do with interpretation and application of that knowledge in question solving, right? So unless and until you are focusing on both equally, I would suggest go ahead and engage with this particular course. It will be of immense benefit to you, right? Use the code BALIVE as well. You get allotted to my batch and you get a substantial discount, much to your benefit too. I hope to see many of you associate with this program, right? Now let's look at this news, guys. It'll be of interest to all of you. NASA to train an Indian astronaut for ISS mission, right? So let's look at the operative paragraph here first. This is directly I've taken from the Indian Express. Very, very important. And what you realize is that, well, this line first. The NASA representative says that we are going to deorbit our space station by 2031, which essentially means that ISS will be looking to be closed by 2031. Now look at this chronology that I've put before you. So we are looking at the Gaganyaan mission that's coming next year. Yes? Is the chat not working, guys? Let me see. Okay. Yes, Deep. Oh, good answer, Deep. Badhiya. Okay, let's look at this now. We are looking at the Gaganyaan mission that is scheduled to be launched by 2024, 2025. The date is still fluctuating, but either of those dates. What is the whole point of the Gaganyaan mission? That we will demonstrate our human spaceflight capability, right? The target is that we'll send a human up until 400 kilometers, then bring the person back down to Earth, land them on Indian sea waters, right? So this is the entire mandate of the Gaganyaan mission. Then you're looking at the Shukrayaan mission, right? You're looking at going to Venus, study the surface, the atmosphere of Venus. This is going to be an orbiter only mission as it has been announced by the ISRO chief, right? Then you're looking at the Mangalyaan 2 mission, where once again we are going to go ahead and study the Martian atmosphere and environment. Okay, we seem to have run out in some problem here. Just a sec. Live. Thank you. All right, we are back, guys, thankfully. Let's get started once again. So, where were we? So, the Mangalyaan 2 mission, where we are going to study the atmosphere, the environment, right? Then we are looking at the decommissioning of the International Space Station that is to happen in 2031. Okay. And then we have our own Indian space station that is to be done by 2035. And eventually the plan to send an Indian on the moon by 2040. Meanwhile, you have the Artemis Accords, which US has said that, well, once again, we are going to put a human on the moon. Right? And then you are looking at China also that has said, we are also going to do the same. So you see, these are the planned missions, the major planned missions in the coming days. Now, more importantly, how is India sending a particular person to ISS? How is that happening? Right? So this is happening as a result of India-US collaboration, and that is the collaboration of the NISAR satellite. What is the NISAR satellite? An Earth observation satellite that will use radar technology to monitor changes on the Earth's surface. Right? It's a space observation, essentially, Earth observation satellite. It will have a 3D model of the Earth, tell us exactly on the ground surfaces, the granular details that we know of. Right? All of that will be done. The changes that are happening on the land, you have tectonic activity that is happening, right? Your plate movements are happening on a continuous basis. So all of that needs to be monitored minutely. Okay, and for that minute observations that are happening on the land, okay, you have the NISAR space satellite that is going to be launched next year. Now that we understand this is the key part, guys, the decommissioning of the ISS will be a watershed moment. It will be a very important moment in the space architecture as we know it. Why? Because up until now, you have only had, say, the Russians, the Americans, and most recently the Chinese, who have gone ahead and, say, launched their own space stations. Okay. When you look at the history of space stations, so you have, say, the first space station that came in, and we'll discuss this. But the Russians went ahead, and they had the Salyut space station. Okay. Then you had the United States that went ahead and it had its Skylab. Okay. The Russians then eventually had others also, say Mir. All of those other came in. Eventually, it was the ISS that was of most importance. Why? Because eventually it was for the first time that these two brought in their technology, their expertise together and well channeled it for the global good. Okay. So recently we have done this class. I'll just take you through it very quickly. That the International Space Station completes 25 years. It is now announced that it will be decommissioned in 2031. right? So 1998 to 2031 is what you're looking at, is the time period of the ISS. It's in the low Earth orbit, involves 5 space agencies. You had these two primarily, then you had Japan, you had Europe, and you had Canada. All together came in with their expertise. The funding, the pooling, the resource distribution is all divided accordingly, right? United States is the biggest beneficiary, okay? It is the biggest contributor, thus it is the biggest beneficiary also. It holds the most relevance insofar as ISS is concerned. Then you have the Russians. Now the Russians have said that we are pulling out of the International Space Station. We are no more going to be interested in continuing this alliance that is happening in space. Now, you please realize this one thing. Why was the ISS important? Because post the Cold War, you had these two big heavyweights that came together and pooled in their resources, overcame their differences, at least when it came to space. But from that time, you are looking at coming to now when the Russia-Ukraine crisis has boiled over to such an extent that that particular tension has now carried forward to space collaboration, right? So this is again a sign of deteriorating, say, what do you say, relationship between countries that hitherto wasn't observed so far, okay? So what does the ISS exactly do? It studies microgravity, like the minute effect of gravity on humankind, okay? So experiments are conducted not just inwards, not just say the effect of microgravity on human health, but you are also looking at, say, outwards. So astronomy, meteorology, all of that. And because of the ISS, you have had several inventions that have come to light, okay? And that you and I use. It is used in medical healthcare, it is used in water filtration. So many of our inventions, we can go ahead and trace its origin to the International Space Station and say whatever research that they were doing, okay? So you have the two primary control modules, like I told you, the two nations, Russia and USA came together. It is the only space station that has been continuously inhabited, yes? Not even a day has gone when a human has not been on the ISS since the first day that person went there, okay? Space tourists also have been to ISS. Movies have been shot in the ISS, okay? And this is the research that it does. Impact of microgravity, Earth use products, like I told you, drug development, water filtration, muscle atrophy, because again you have microgravity. And so one of the primary areas of research was, how does microgravity go ahead and affect, say, your bone mass, your muscle mass, right? Because eventually you'll realize that it's the human body that is feeling the effect of microgravity, right? So that is a primary area of research there too. So now what happens after 2031, guys? Since USA has said that they are going to be closing 2031 the ISS, it will be handed over primarily to the private bodies, or you will have private bodies that will take the place of the International Space Station. Russia has also said bye-bye Tata, not happening anymore. So what is the future? One future that you are looking at is the possibility that the space architecture could be entirely dominated by the Chinese. The Chinese have launched their Tiangong mission. Yes, the heaven in the sky or something they call it. So the Tiangong mission, right? That is one possibility that the whole global community is looking at very closely. Because please realize that space domination is a direct byproduct of how dominant and how collaborative you are on the ground. Okay, you will never have, say, an underdeveloped or a developing nation be of dominance in the space. And by space domination, I mean doing those missions that are deep space, that have the potential to go ahead and change mankind forever, right? So that you are looking at, say, China is almost announcing its arrival on the international fora because of Tiangong, right? You have also had the European Space Agency, other national bodies that have withdrawn from international collaborations with Russia. Why? Because again, the Russia-Ukraine crisis has just killed collaboration completely, right? At the same time, you find USA goes and searches for new partners through the Artemis Accords, right? The timing is crucial. Straight away, you'll realize this now, right? So this is what we are looking at. The Chinese domination of space architecture could be a reality. From the examination perspective, again, some analysis that I wanted to provide for you so that you can go ahead and frame a holistic answer. Right? Go ahead and answer this question for me, my friends. Skylab, Salyut, Mir, Tiangong. You will identify the correctly matched space station for me if you followed the lecture closely. I think this question will be very easy for you. Okay? Right? That was question number 2. Now, before I go forward once again in 60 seconds or less, the P2I foundation course, Yes, the earlier one that I showed you was prelims specific. This looks at prelims plus mains plus interview. Okay, you get coached by some of the most talented faculty, talented colleagues that I have seen, right? They will take care of individual subjects for you. Okay, answer writing, question solving, concept building, giving you all that is required for you to go ahead and succeed in the examination and more. That is the entire focus of the P2I GS Foundation course, right? Offered in 3 languages, bilingual, that is a mix of Hindi and English, where obviously the notes will be provided in English. Okay. Then you have English batch and Hindi batch starting on these dates, an evening batch for you. Go ahead and use the code BA Live if you go ahead and understand how I communicate and how I try to explain things, because then that assures you that you get allotted to my batch. And we can go ahead and start with our geography and our disaster management, our reading comprehensions, and the other subjects obviously taken off by my esteemed colleagues. Right? I hope to see once again many of you associate with this. Chalo, let's look at the third and the final topic of this morning. Behind unseasonal rain and lightning strikes in Gujarat. So recently you had, abundant lightning strikes that were observed in Gujarat. Okay. Now, before I go forward, one thing that you need to be aware of is the status of lightning in India. We'll look at, say, what exactly this article is all about. Okay, give that a second. First, let's understand how is lightning getting caused. Okay, chalo, let's do this. Let me just add a slide very quickly and then we can go ahead. New slide. Excellent. Right. So let's go ahead and understand what exactly is my lightning first. And I'll try to do it in a briefest manner so that, well, you can keep some recollections for later. So what exactly is lightning? Firstly, it's a what? Can I call it a powerful, visible, electric phenomenon? Right? I can see it. So it's a powerful, visible, electric phenomenon. Now, why exactly is it formed? What is that visibility, that light that you see? Why is that happening? Well, that is happening. This visibility is happening because of the rapid expansion of air. Inside the cloud, you have the air that rapidly expands, right? And in that rapid expansion of air, you have firstly a thunder, and then that accompanies the lightning. Okay. Now, the most common phenomenon that you will see in your books is to do with cloud to ground lightning. The most common phenomenon, obviously. But then recently you find, again, if you have been following your current affairs, if you have been regular in this class, you will realize that we are looking at another type of cloud that goes from, say, lower altitude to higher altitude. Okay. And this particular cloud, normally you see in the stratospheric zone, okay, in the stratosphere, which goes by the name of blue jet. We have done this in previous classes, okay. For those of you who have been associated with the prelims to interview program, I think this will be an absolutely known entity to you. So this is the basics of lightning first. Now in India, which are the states that you are looking at as at the most risk of lightning? Okay. So you will find that my frequency of lightning, this is higher in my northeastern states. Okay. What is the frequency? Say the number of lightning that you can observe. Okay. This is higher in my, say, northeastern states. You are looking at, say, plus you are looking at West Bengal. Okay. You are also looking at Jharkhand, Odisha. This is where your frequency is the highest. Okay. But where is your highest number of deaths happening? Now, you would expect that wherever the highest number of lightning is happening, that should be the highest number of deaths too. But that is not the case. The highest number of deaths that you find happen in Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh. Okay. Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, and also Odisha. Recently, in fact, you must have observed, again, current affairs, we have been discussing this, that the state of Odisha saw roughly 61,000 lightning that struck it within what, a limited time period, 12 or 13 people died. 61,000 lightning strikes were observed. So do you realize it is a problem area? Now, one more thing that you need to know is what is the status of lightning when we discuss, say, disaster management. So clearly you must realize that, well, it is a big problem, especially if you have, say, 61,000 lightning strikes that are happening globally. In fact, in a national basis, you are looking at close to 2,500 deaths, recorded deaths that happen as a consequence of lightning. Now, is lightning classified as a part of my disaster management process? Okay. Is it a disaster? No. Lightning is not categorized as a disaster in India. Now, why is that? Can someone tell me in the chat how many people are watching this? Okay. So, whatever number of students that we have, very nice. Let's go ahead and quickly tell me what is the thought process behind lightning not being, say, categorized as a disaster in India? Bataiye. What is the thought process? What is the logic? The logic is quite simple, guys. Okay, understand this. The logic is quite simple. All the Union Government of India says is that lightning is something that you can go ahead and avoid. That it is an awareness related issue, right? So the Union of India says that this is essentially an awareness or an education issue. Okay. And that through proper sensitization and timely, say, monitoring and, say, warning systems and timely dissemination of information, you can go ahead and minimize this number. Which is why you do not have lightning that is categorized as a disaster in India. On the other hand, the states are of the view that, well, you should go ahead and categorize this as a disaster at least until you have the proper mechanism of information dissemination and risk reduction in place. Okay. Now, what exactly is risk reduction? I use this term because I know that many of you, if I right now ask you, say, the difference between risk transfer, risk reduction, okay, or risk analysis, risk interpretation or assessment. Yes, many of you may not be clear on that. I had uploaded a couple of questions on my Telegram channel and I was surprised to find that many students made that mistake that I expected them to make. Okay. So these are key terms which you ought to know of if you have studied your disaster management in detail, right? Lightning is not categorized based on this justification. However, what you find is that up until you are going to go ahead and reduce this number, there needs to be a mechanism of at least information dissemination in place. Given that you are looking at, say, climate change that is increasing the frequency of my lightning, not just the frequency but the distribution also. Okay. You're also looking at increased urbanization that is leading to, say, more energy consumption, right? Thus, cities are getting warmer, heat islands are getting formed. Yes, so more thunderstorm activity is happening, which means more lightning strikes are happening, right? This is the correlation that I'm trying to make. So go ahead, understand this topic in entirety, because this exactly is the focus when we look at, say, what happened in Gujarat. So in Gujarat, what happened was the convergence of three particular weather patterns. Okay, you had the western disturbances that you normally attribute to, say, winter rainfall, right? So your western disturbances come towards India. Okay. As a result, you have a cyclonic circulation that develops in my Arabian Ocean. And then your easterlies. Your easterlies start moving. So you have these three particular mechanisms that form an intense weather pattern. Right? So the three, again, I'm going to mention it for you. Your western disturbances, because of which you had a cyclonic formation that developed in my Arabian, cyclonic circulation. And then you had the easterly trough, right, which essentially was traveling from southwest to northeast, right. So the accumulation of all of these three in the Arabian Sea and towards, say, Pakistan, Gujarat, Rajasthan essentially leads to this weather pattern. Now, this isolated incident is not that important for you, but you need to realize this, that going forward, because as a result of climate change and, say, the effect it has on wind patterns, not just in a regional basis, but also in a sub-regional basis, right? You will have this intensity, you will have a direct correlation that the frequency, the intensity, as well as, say, the distribution of your lightning strikes, this will increase. This is going to increase in the coming days. So, as a policy measure, how would you go ahead? What would you do to, say, categorize lightning as a disaster in India is the question that I have for you. Now, you need to analyze that and come up with the answer to that based on the information that I have provided to you. Okay? Okay, let's go ahead and answer this for me very quickly. In the context of tropical easterly jet stream on Indian monsoons, consider the following statements. These streams play an important role in the reversal of upper air circulation patterns. The streams steer the tropical depressions into India, and the tracks of these streams are the areas of the highest rainfall. Okay, identify the correct statements. Leave your answer for me in the comment box. Again, if your geography is clear, then this question should be an absolute cakewalk for you. Okay, if any P2I students are watching this, I expect you to get this correct because we have discussed this extensively in the class. The movement of my TEJs, as we discussed in class, the tropical easterly jet streams. Okay. Right? Any doubts that you have for me, by the way, I'd most welcome questions. You can reach out to me on my Telegram channel that goes by the name of Bhuvan StudyIQ. Right? Okay, let's look at the questions of yesterday then. So yesterday we discussed Mexico, by the way. We discussed axolotls, right? The critically endangered amphibian. And in that process, we discussed why Mexico is emerging as an important destination as an alternative to the Panama Canal, right? Because again, you have the Panama Canal that is under the effect of El Nino, right? And we discussed how Panama Canal uses water, needs water. And thus this period of drought or say period of lesser than normal rainfall is directly affecting your global trade. So see, wherever your money gets involved, straight away people will find solutions to it. And so as a solution, you find that the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, which is going to be operationalized in a month from now, I believe, sometime very soon. This being done in Mexico is essentially a rail project. Okay, so this is a rail project which will connect the Pacific and the Atlantic and is being developed as an alternative to the Panama Canal system. Okay, very, very important in terms of global trade, economics. It's a convergence of El Nino. It's a convergence of, well, so many topics come together, right? So have a very good idea of this particular project, the interoceanic corridor of the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. The answer here being D. Okay. So we discussed yesterday the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Vikas Yojana, which was essentially per drop more crop. We discussed one part of it, where we looked at water efficiency, bringing more area under irrigation. All of that is this mandate of this particular mission, and this has subsumed 3 earlier missions. The Accelerated Irrigation Benefits Program under Ministry of Jal Shakti, Integrated Watershed Management Program being done by Rural Development, and the Farm Water Management being done by Department of Agriculture. All are correct here. Once again, your answer being D. Okay, these 3 were subsumed as a part of this. Right? So for the sports fans, recently we had the Ballon d'Or that was announced. You will let me know who won the Ballon d'Or. The Ballon d'Or is in the sport of football. Okay. Puskas is the best goal that is awarded, again in football, whereas a FIH Player of the Year is to do with hockey. Federation of International Hockey. Okay. So the correctly matched here being only 2. Right. Let me know in the chat box in today's answers, guys, who won the Ballon d'Or this year, by the way. Okay. Eldo, Neeraja, Shubham, Momita. Momita, thank you for your message. You're most kind. Pooja, Harshit, Manika, Studying Raccoon, Mandeep, Akhil, Vaishnavi, Coder, Shafkat, Manoj, Gatso, Rahul, Aditya, Akshay. Thank you so much, guys, for your, firstly for your kind messages that you leave for me from time to time. Okay, and for your continued participation in this endeavor as we seek to understand the analysis. Okay, we seek to understand what's written in the newspaper plus go beyond it and take it to that level where the examination perspective is covered. Okay, I'm grateful for your faith. To the rest of you, I encourage you to go ahead and leave your answers to the 3-4 questions that I've left today. Leave your answers for me in the comment box and we will see the right answers in tomorrow's class. And you can go ahead and access the entire PDF of this lecture from this very Telegram channel that I upload around noon. Also, you can expect some questions based on this discussion that I shall be uploading on my Telegram channel later this afternoon. Right? Till I see you once again tomorrow morning, guys. Before you go, once again, I'll request you, please do leave me a like and a comment. Feedback, good or bad, is always welcome from my students. Okay? Till I see you tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. This is Bhuvan signing off for StudyIQ IAS English. Thanks for watching. Have a productive day.